Hi everybody, welcome back. The last big topic you need to get familiar with is XAML. This is the file format for the front end of your UI forms in WPF. And the best way to get familiar with them is to start using it right away. So, we will open Visual Studio and create a very simple UI form together in just a moment. And I will break down all the components and how they work and explain you all the things that you need to know. But before that, let's start with the basic question. What exactly is XAML? XAML stands for Extensible Application Markup Language. It's a declarative language that we use to define and initialize objects in WPF. Think of it as a blueprint for your user interface. Just like HTML is used to structure content on the web, XAML is used to structure your UI components in a WPF form. And also keep in mind that WPF is a framework for building rich desktop applications, and XAML is an XML-based language for defining UI elements in the WPF. XAML has very similar syntax to HTML to define components with arrow brackets and to fill in attributes inside the arrow tag. But unlike HTML, XAML is strongly tied to .NET framework, and therefore it's used with .NET languages like C#, VB.NET, and Iron Python. And obviously, it has different names for components and attributes than HTML, but you will see this in a moment. I just like to make this comparison between XAML and HTML because many people are familiar with HTML, and it's much quicker for them to get familiar with XAML syntax because there are a lot of similarities. But overall, it's not a rocket science, don't worry, I'm gonna explain everything. Now, why do we use XAML in WPF? The beauty of XAML lies in the ability to separate the UI design of your forms and the code logic. This separation makes it much easier to manage and maintain your application, especially at scale. Designers can work on the look and the feel of their XAML forms, while developers can focus on the backend code and think about all the logic and everything they need for the form. But in your case, you're going to be both the designer and developer, and it's not that complicated. Also, keep in mind that you can create your WPF forms only using Python code too, but it's going to be a mess as you would need to declare a lot of classes and fill in all the properties one by one. And I think it's going to be a complete mess. So instead, we will use XAML and we will use Python sometimes to populate different items in the lists and creating logic for the form and maybe some extra functionality. And now, as I mentioned, the best way to explain what is XAML is to create a UI form, and I will try to explain everything you might need along the way. In the previous lesson, you've already set up Visual Studio and I showed you around. So let's open it up and I will write a short XAML code for a very simple UI form that looks like this. And then I'll break it down so you get the idea what's going on in our XAML files, and I'm going to break down each component one by one. Also keep in mind that in this lesson, the goal is just to explain XAML syntax to you and not to make complete form for the pyRevit. We will focus on complete forms in the next module of the course because we will also need to bind components to Python code, and that might be tricky for the first time. But I'll provide you templates which will make it super easy. You will get my WPF starter kit for pyRevit, and I'm going to include different examples inside of it. But for now, let's just focus on the XAML. Let's open it up, and here's the form that we're going to create. As I showed you in the previous lesson, here on the left you have this kind of preview of your form. You can click around, see all the elements, and on the right you can see the code. The first thing I'm going to do is just select everything that I wrote before and delete. And now we're going to start from scratch. You see, first of all, we have this window. And in here we have the tag of the window, which is the element. And then here there are different properties and attributes. I'm going to go through and explain all these kind of components and all the properties inside of it one by one. But first, I'm just going to quickly make this whole form again from scratch. And maybe I'm going to explain something along the way. And then in the end, I'm just going to go through and explain what is a window, what is the stack panel, how the UI tree work, and all of this. So don't worry, it might be a little bit quick for you now, but just bear with me. So first of all, I want to create a stack panel. And you can see there's going to be a lot of auto suggestions. And for example, when I'm going to put this arrow key here, you'll see automatically the closing part as well. Let's make some space. And this is going to create like a box where we're going to place all the elements and they're going to be stacked on top of each other. It also can be stacked vertically or horizontally, and it's vertically by default. Then we're going to create first label and text box. Also, there are a few shortcuts that are really beneficial for you in Visual Studio Code. For example, to turn it into the comment, I'm going to hold Ctrl Q and C. Then I'm going to turn it into a comment. And you can see that in XAML, comments are made like this. You put kind of arrow keys, then you need the exclamation mark and 2 dashes here and 2 dashes here. And it can be multi-line as well. Let's write comment here too. Now, I'm going to remove it. And I just changed my mind. Let's also create the skeleton of your UI form, and then we're going to go and code it. skeleton is pretty much when we're gonna just create a bunch of different comments where we're gonna define the steps. Here's the input 1, input 2, input 3, this, and then we're gonna go and fill in the code. So as you saw on the screenshot earlier, we're gonna have first label, then we're gonna create second label and the text box. Then we're gonna create third label with the combo box. Combo box is like pull down menus where you can select something. Also, I'm duplicating by using Ctrl D. This is the same as any other ID. Then we're gonna create a separator and we're gonna have our submit button. So far, it's quite easy. Let's make some spaces here in between. And we're gonna start coding with the first one. For the label and text, to have them on the same line, we could also use the stack panel and make it horizontal, or it would be much better to use the dock panel, like this, right? Inside of the dock panel, we wanna put our text and then the text box. So we're gonna put this arrow key. Already I can see suggestions. I need my text block. And also when we use elements where we wanna provide text, like text block, for example, there are two ways to do this. One, we can create like dock panel and just write text here, right? You will see it right away. Or if you want to make it a little bit more compact, we can do it a bit differently. We can write text block, and instead of clicking on the arrow, I'm going to click on this slash. And it automatically also adds the arrow, and this is a self-closing tag. For example, dock panel, stack panel, you can see we have the beginning, here's the end, and the same for the dock panel. Here's the beginning, here's an end. And you'll notice that end also has the slash. Or we can create a self-closing tag, where is the text block and just this kind of slash and arrow. Then there is no need to start and end. And now to fill in the content, we're actually going to use the property. And you can see I already have suggestions and I want to use the text. Inside, we're going to write input A. For now, that's okay. And now for the second thing, we want to use text box. And I'm also going to make it self-closing. You can see right away that text box is this kind of menu where users will be able to fill it in. Also, don't worry that it looks a little bit ugly. You can see there is no spacing anything. So I'm going to go to the stack panel and I want to set the margin. Margin is the space outside of the element. I'm going to set it to 10. And you can see right away it jumped 10 from all sides. With margin also you will notice that you can provide 4 values here. First, we always provide for the left, then for the top, for the right, and then for the bottom. And you will see left is 10, top is 20, 30, 40. In my case, I want to have the same margin all around and 10 is going to be enough. Now, let's also add margin to our dock panel. And if we're going to set 10, it's going to make it a little bit nicer. Now, I don't like that my text block and text box are way too close. So we're also going to add the margin right here. So I'm going to put here margin. Now, on the left, I want to be 0. On the top, I want to be 0. On the right, I want to be 10. And then 0 on the bottom. And you can see we only created this kind of margin right here on the right. And text block is okay. We already have here. We can also define here some default value by using the text property. And here's, for example, default value, blah, blah, blah. We can also set the foreground color to maybe something like beige, so it's not that light, or maybe gray. Yeah, so it's going to be like this. I'm not really sure if I want to leave a default value here, but I'm just showing you different options of what you can think. Usually the foreground always represents the color of the text in different elements, and the background, obviously the background of your elements. All right, I think this is fine for our first input. Now let's create the second one. And as a guest, we're just going to copy and paste it right here. Now, I want to rename it, and you can also rename it inside of the preview editor. For example, I can double click here and you can see sometimes you can access this kind of editing. Let's say that I want to make it input B, then click on escape or something else. And you can see it also changes it here. So you can kind of keep jumping between the code, between different properties, and between the preview window itself, because it's very, very interactive. All right, we have our second element as well. Now, for the third one, we want to make a combo box. We're going to take again the dock panel, and in here, we're going to do the following. First of all, let's rename it to input C. And then instead of a text block, we're going to remove that. And I want to use the combo box, so I can have this kind of menu from where we can select different items. It's called the combo box. And this one, we want to keep it open because we will need to fill it in with different items inside of it. You can see it already kind of takes the size here. And listen, when you work with the stack panel, usually elements inside try to kind of fill it in. But you can also define here, let's say that I want to make my width to be maybe like 300, or maybe I want to make it 100, whatever you want. And you can see it changes. But right now, I want to keep it as simple as possible. We're not going to set the width. All right, we have our combo box. Now we need items inside of it. Normally, the way you do this is, first of all, you're going to create your combo box and you're going to leave it empty like this. Later in the Python code, you're going to get this combo box. You're going to get your elements from maybe a Revit API. Then you're going to prepare them and you're going to push these elements inside this combo box. So you can, for example, select, I don't know, wall types, right? And there's going to be all your wall types because there is no way you can come here in XAML and set up the logic to get your Revit API. But for this example, I'm just going to also hard code it because inside combo box, we can put combo box item. And I'm going to make it self-closing. And let's make the content something like walls, then floors, roofs, windows, and doors. Now, in here, I cannot really open and have a look at it, but what I can do here is I can set the default value selected. Let's say I want to set the windows. I'm gonna write is selected, and it's gonna be true. And you can see right away windows popped up. Now, we already have pretty good form. Now I want a separator because I like to use separators. This one is very easy. Just gonna use separator and put it like this. Now, maybe it comes out a little bit too far, so we're also gonna give it a margin. And I don't want to give it too much margin on top and bottom, so we're just gonna give it 10 on the left, 0 on the top, 10 on the right, 0 on the bottom. And now you can see it aligns very nicely with all our inputs. Now lastly, we want to get a button. Let's click here, a button. Inside, we're gonna write content is gonna be submit. And you'll also notice that sometimes there's gonna be like text, sometimes there's gonna be like content. Usually I just try one or the other, and with all the autocomplete, it works pretty well. You're gonna try text, you can see, okay, something doesn't really work here. So instead, we're gonna try content, or maybe we're not gonna try anything. You're gonna see all the kind of most favorite items on the top. Also here, you can see the range stands for the property, then there is like Spark stands for different events. This one I'm not even sure what, I think it's for the other components. So now let's set the content, and it's gonna be submit. Now, I don't like having it so big, so this one we definitely want to set width, maybe, I don't know, 150. Yeah, I think 100 is enough. And also, I don't like that I don't have spacing here, so actually we need some spacing for the margin. So let's make also here 10 for the bottom. The reason I don't want to make it here for the top, because it's going to be too much, because we have our dock panel with the margin all around it. So we're going to go back until we have 0. Now, I want to make it a little bit nicer. First of all, I want to make this input bold. One way would be to select here in the preview editor and Control B. Then I'm going to click on Escape. And you will see right away, right here, it has changed something. It added here font weight bold. But it didn't do it in the right way, because you can see it added this run tag. And this is sort of a way when you have a large text and only one word in this text have to be bold. So this is not ideal. Let's go back. Another way would be, all right, we're just going to write here bold and see if we get something. Nothing. And if you know anything about programming, usually it's called font weight. So we're going to write font. I'm going to see we have font size, family, stretch, style, and weight. This is what I want. And I get all the autocompletes right away. Let's say that I want to have it bold. That's fine. And now we're going to copy it to all the other text blocks here. One here and one here. All right, now it looks much better. Windows is fine. This one is fine. So this is pretty much our complete form. It works pretty good. Now, there are a few more shortcuts I wanted to show you. Because here, for example, you see we created these comments by just writing some text. And then we hold Control, click on K and C. Now, to uncomment it back, it's going to be Control KU for uncomment. Now we also get an error. Don't worry. It tells me here what's going on. And I'm just going to remove it. And that's fine. Another thing, there is a format document. This one is, let's say that maybe I have different things in different places. I coded really bad. This one is here, there. Now I want to fix it really quick. I'm going to hold Control, K, and D for the document. And you can see it kind of styles it all in the right places. If this one was there, this one, let's actually just make it like this. Control K, D makes it nice. Also, if you maybe want to keep this one like this for whatever reason, and then you have an issue with that one, you can select it. And there's another one for Control KF to only style your selection. Control KF. All right, so we made this form. Now let's talk about the structure. Now I want to break down all this code, explain all additional things that you need to be aware of. First of all, we're going to start with the UI tree. In XAML, the UI is structured as hierarchical, I hate this word, tree of elements, often referred as visual or UI tree. Each element in this tree is an object in the WPF framework. The tree begins on the top with the element like, for example, windows here, and then it branches out to include other containers like stack panel, dock panel, grids, and individual controls inside of them like text box, button, separator, and all of this. This hierarchy dictates how UI components relate to each other and on the screen, determining the layout and the appearance of them. As you can see, there are also arrows here which can be really useful in navigating your UI forms. For example, I can open and close my window. Okay, here's the stack panel. This is this element here. You can also select it and it will highlight what are you working with. Then here you can see there's the dock panel. Let's click on it. I can close my dock panel 1, 2, 3. And now here's the bare bones. I have my first label, second label, third label, separator, and submit button. Oh, by the way, by the label, I mean the text box. But there's also this document outline that I showed you earlier. This is pretty much the same thing, but in the collapsed way. And also you can kind of collapse it here if you want. Let's say I don't want to see the first two for whatever reason, and I want to work only on that. I don't really hide elements, but sometimes I can definitely see where it's going to be useful. All right, I have also broken something. I think I dragged it somewhere. All right, let me just hit Ctrl Z a few times, and now I think we're back to normal. Now, next, let's talk about the components in XAML. I refer to this, for example, stack panel, dock panel, text block, text box, and all of this. As you've already realized, they always start with these brackets on each side of the component name. These components are the building blocks of your UI form, and each one of them corresponds to a specific class in the WPF framework, which has its own properties, events, and so on. We're going to go through all of them just in a moment, but I also want you to pay attention inside the component attributes or properties. And I mean like this margin, text here, foreground. You'll notice that they are always going to be in the starting component, or if it's a self-closing tag, which I'm going to explain again in a moment, we always put it here with the spaces. And it's very easy inside of Visual Studio because we have autocomplete for everything we need. You can say maybe it's vertical alignment should be, I don't know, stretch or maybe bottom or whatever. It's very easy to find. Just make sure that you don't delete anything like this because then you're going to see invalid markup. So I'm going to go back. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more about open and self-close tags in just a moment, because I already mentioned it a little. But now let's just start on the top with the first component, which is the window, and then we're going to go one by one. When you create your WPF forms, you will always start with the window class in your XAML file. It's the root of the window, and it represents the whole canvas of your form. Like all other components, it has like title, height, width, window start application, resize mode, xmlns, and the one with the X. Overall, all these attributes are self-explanatory except for these two, and they can be really confusing. But you can think of them as imports in your Python scripts. In your Python scripts, you're going to write from Autodesk, Revit, DB, import, everything, and you bring all the classes. In XAML, it's a little bit weird. The first one is going to be this xmlns, and there's going to be this kind of URL. And this is going to be like import for all necessary classes, like for example, stack panel, dock panel, text block, text box, and so on. This is the default namespace for WPF forms, and it's like a module from where you import everything. Like I just compared it to Revit API imports. The second one right here is also like an import, and it's for additional namespace that provides special attributes to elements, specifically for XAML such as xname, xkey, and a few others. For example, in here, I would define xname equals custom name. And later on, I will be able to kind of use this name to get it inside my code. But we're going to talk about this some other lesson. Let's just simplify this for now. Now, the next we have stack panel. And it's like a container that stacks all the child elements inside, either vertically or horizontally. It's great for creating resizable components, and don't worry about exact X and Y positions of your components. I strongly recommend you to always start with stack panels so it makes it easier. As you see, I don't have to think where my components are, and if I want to change the first and the second one, I'm just going to move the code, and now B is the first, A is the second. They're really good for kind of stacking all your elements, and you can create multiple stacks and columns, and later I'm going to show you that. Then the next one is the dock panel, and it arranges its child element in a dock, where you can space element at the edges, set the space in between, is it here, maybe it's going to be justified, and so on. Here, it's used to place the text block and text box together, and I like using them just when you need a few components on the same line. Example, it works really good to combine this kind of text here and the input, then text, input, and so on. That works pretty good. Then inside of the next dock panel, you can see there's a combo box. And as you can already see, this is just a pull-down menu from where you can select one of the options. As I mentioned already, the combo box defined initially empty, and later it's populated with the combo box items using your IronPython or C# code. So you can provide your own custom elements inside depending on whatever you get from your projects. But for this example, I just hard-coded this kind of elements just so we have something inside. And you can see that inside of combo box, obviously we need to provide combo box item. And this is the hierarchy of the elements and how they connect it. This way, XAML knows that, okay, if it's a combo box item, I'm going to show it like this in combo box. Then separator here is just a line, which you can see goes right here. And lastly, button is a button. You click on it and there are some events to control what happens. Right now, we don't have any events. We're going to talk about this later. Now, let's talk again about the closing tags, because I really want to drive this point home. You can see, for example, right here, we have the stack panel beginning, stack panel end. And in between, you have all the elements. And some elements, they don't have the beginning and an end. They just kind of have the self-closing tag. You could make it beginning and an end, but normally you would just want to save space and make it very readable for you, so you make it self-closing. The difference is if they represent an empty elements or elements with content inside of them. Some tags like stack panels, combo box, dock panels will have children elements inside of them. Therefore, they have the beginning and an end, so it's very easy to populate things inside. Other components can also have like text inside of them, like I showed you earlier with the text block. But to be honest, it's much nicer to just create it as a property, so it's much better to make it as a closing tag. However, keep this in mind. Sometimes we would create the beginning and the end tag for the elements which don't have any content inside of them. And we can also do this to add more settings for resources and styling and other advanced features. For example, let's say that I want to take this text box and I want to change how it looks, right? I want to go in resources and change its styling. There are different ways to approach it, especially if you want to templatize it. Anyway, we won't go that deep now. I will just want to show you a very simple example, and I will dive deeper in the styling and kind of reusing your styles in other modules of this course. For example, to make this one with rounded corners, here's what we would do. First, find it, and it's right here. One way would be to sort of create it beginning and an end, right? The way I did it, I just kind of remove this closing tag, and I just put the arrow. And it automatically gives me the ending tag right away. Let's make some space. I'm going to write something in between. In here is going to be a little bit weird, but just bear with me, just an example. Now, in here, I want to create a tag for the text box, and I'm going to go into resources. This is sort of resources specifically for this text. I can also set resources for the window class, which is a very common way. There's like window resources, and then you kind of define the styles which will be applied to all your text boxes, to all your buttons, and all other components you want. You can also name them, and there is a lot of functionality to templatize it. We're not going to go that far yet. Now, we're going to go here, and now I want to modify one of the property of the text box. Now, I want to create a style, and I'm going to target this style for the border. This is going to be a little bit unusual syntax, but just bear with me. Now, once we're inside the style, we want to set the setter, and I want to set the setter for the property, which is called corner radius. And we're going to set the value to be maybe, I don't know, 5. Let's see how it looks, and we can close it. I can see right away, my form now has this rounded edges right here. Let's maybe make it 10. Now it's more like a pill. I actually like it 5 much more. And now we have included the style for our text box. This is another reason why you want to kind of open up your kind of components to put in some additional information. But as you can see, once you're going to kind of copy paste it everywhere, it's going to be quite messy. So keep this in mind. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to remove that one. Maybe I'm just going to cut it. I'm going to remove this closing tag. And now if I'm going to click here, you'll notice that there's invalid error. And now I need to close it by putting a slash in there. Now it's closed and we're back to normal. Now lastly, since I already showed you a little bit about styling, let me show you a little bit more. I'm going to create window resources like this. This is going to be like your CSS and HTML. Here we're going to define all the styles. And now inside, I'm just going to paste the style so you can see that it applied right away to others. It's going to be different because first of all, you need to create a style which is going to be target all the text boxes inside of the window, right? Then you would need to set the template for them. And then inside this template, you would target text block again. And then you would just take the border and set it there. This is one of the ways to do this, but we're not going to go that deep yet. Just going to remove it. It's just for you to get the idea that you can create global styles inside your forms. You can also take it outside the form as a separate file, but I'm just going way too far right now. All right, and this is the basic introduction to XAML. This is how you create your front end of the form using XAML format. But remember that we still need to connect this UI form with our RN Python, so it can be shown and interacted with by the user. Usually, this is where everybody gets stuck because when creating WPF forms for pyRevit, there is not a lot of resources out there for Python in general, but for pyRevit even less. So there are definitely a few things that you should be aware of. But trust me, I'll break it down for you and share everything you need to know to get started and get good at creating these forms. But there are just a few more lessons I want to cover in this introduction module before we jump into pyRevit script. And also, you're gonna get a homework after this lesson. You saw how I used XAML, how I created different components, moved them around, and now I want you to create what I did here. First of all, try to mimic what I did here, but try to experiment a little bit more. Change the order of how the elements look, try adding some elements here and there, look at their properties, change something else, change the sizes and see what else is available. And honestly, you will learn so much more about XAML by just randomly exploring it, trying to make things and trying to make changes than just watching me do it for you. It was great watching me to do this, but now it's your time to mimic what I just did here, take my code and then start changing it. Change the size of the form, try to make it maybe compress, add more components, try to maybe open the toolbox, see what else is available. Just kind of try to get in there. Listen, while you're gonna do this, you're gonna get some errors, and that's okay. Don't worry, it's okay that you're gonna get errors. This is exactly what we're gonna talk about in the next lesson. I'm gonna show you a little bit more about debugging your XAML script so you know what to do when you encounter errors. So I'm gonna see you soon. Happy coding.